This is Jim Fetzer in Madison, Wisconsin, with my colleagues Giuseppe Vafanculo from the District of Criminals and David Scorpio from the exotic land of Ecuador. We are here to bring you all the news you need to know. We begin with Sidney Powell reaffirming that this was designed to rig elections, telling Maria Bartiromo the Trump team's evidence will overturn multiple states. She began talking about a particular person, Peter Neffinger, president and on the board of the directors of Smartmatic. And guess what? It just so happens he's on the Biden presidential team. Surprise, surprise. That's going to be non-existent because we're going to overturn the results of the election in multiple states. And that was just to start. She connected Neffinger to the software used to alter or remove votes. President Trump won not just by hundreds of thousands, but by millions of votes that were shifted by this software that was designed expressly for that purpose. Meanwhile, we have a report including from Louis Gohmert in Texas about the theft of the election, which shows that by taking the servers, seizing the servers that Seidel, the Spanish firm, had located in Germany of all places, they've been able to reconstruct what actually happened, that Donald Trump won 410 votes, including California and Minnesota. Listen to this.
U.S. Army forces went into Seidel and grabbed their server. There's some that believe this is the U.S. intelligence that manipulated all this.
New reports claim the real results of the 2020 U.S. election were found on a computer server that was seized by the U.S. military in Frankfurt, Germany. In a recent tweet, a Virginia congressional candidate shared an electoral map that's allegedly based off of this data from that server. It shows a landslide victory for President Trump with a 410 electoral college vote, including liberal strongholds California and Minnesota. Congressman Louis Gohmert, you just heard from him there. He says the real election results were stolen through vulnerabilities in the Dominion voting system.
Extremely compelling evidence that could be gleaned from Seidel, that's SCYTL. That's a company headquartered in Barcelona, Spain, that was responsible for aggregating all the information from all the machines and whatnot. But now the main headquarters had moved to Frankfurt. That information as to how many votes were switched from Republican for Democrat would have been easily established from the information that Seidel gathered.
Reports say the data gathered by the U.S. military in Frankfurt provides enough evidence to overturn the election and expose the voter fraud committed by the Democrat Party.
Meanwhile, Trump has fired his director of Homeland Security, of the Homeland Security Agency, who had rejected his election conspiracy theories. I mean, how bad is this? Trump fired Department of Homeland Security official who had rejected his claims of widespread voter fraud when there's massive evidence to the contrary. He announced on Twitter he was firing Chris Krebs, director of Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and directly tied it to Krebs' statement that there's no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes, changed votes, or was in any way compromised. How stunning. The recent statement he made was highly inaccurate. There are massive improprieties and fraud, therefore effective immediately. Chris Krebs has been terminated as director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. That is completely appropriate. Krebs has been responsible for a widely praised revamp of the department's cybersecurity efforts and increasing coordination with state and local officials. But it appears to me that all that was a ruse, and he was, in fact, in bed with Dominion and Smartmatic. Nothing else makes any sense here, because he's egregiously wrong. This is grossly offensive, and he certainly warranted being fired. Giuseppe, your thoughts?
Shocking the monstrous level of conspiracy involved in delivering Joe Biden as the installed 46th president of the United States. Now, fingers crossed, toes crossed that Sidney Powell, who is a heavy hitter, when Romo asked Sidney, how do you intend to prove it? She goes, I can't go into this on national TV. I just can't do it, which clearly is wise. You don't want to tip your hand to your enemy. So how is she going to do it? It's either going to be in state courts or federal court. So it'll be curious to see which way she goes. And secondly, the Krebs is symptomatic of what Scorpio said last week about Donald J. Caesar is surrounded by the long knives. They're all out to betray him and attack him and stab him in the back.
You got it exactly right, Scorpio. You were right on target. Your thoughts?
Well, the parade of rhino Republicans continues to flow. People that are slowly acquiescing to Groper Joe's supposed victory. And I don't know if you caught it, but last night, Tucker Carlson said 2 different times on his show that the election is over. I was pretty disappointed in that and shocked as well. And, they're pushing this meme that this is the most secure election in the history of the country. Well, what a load of crap that is. I saw an interview on PBS with various election officials who were praising themselves. I mean, just like little school children with self-esteem class, how wonderful they did in their election and how dedicated they all are. And, how any notion of impropriety is just ridiculous. And we're dedicated government officials and we did the best job ever. It was just disgusting. And so I hope something comes of this, because I'm disgusted by all of this double talk and in-your-face lies.
I think we all agree with that 100%. And when Trump won by 410 votes, that's one of the great landslides in American history. Here's part of the way they were doing it to just go further than Dominion alone. No, this is Trump. A Georgia recount auditor claimed multiple Trump ballots were fraudulently called out for Biden when they were doing a hand review. The person looking at the ballot, it says Trump, they call out Biden, and they were having to be corrected. Meanwhile, the Georgia recount auditors called multiple ballots for Biden that were actually marked for Trump. The second person was supposed to be checking it right 3 times in 3 minutes. She called out Biden when it actually was Trump. Earlier in the day, the Georgia Secretary of State, Raffensperger, hit back against claims he facilitated an unfair illegal ballot count. He's also been accused of trying to skip the manual recount altogether, and initially wanted to just rescan the barcodes and be done with it, because Dominion redoes the barcodes to make them come out the way they want. Meanwhile, another memory card with 2,755 uncounted ballots was found in Georgia. It's happening again and again. The large majority were for President Trump. It turns out now the margin for Biden in Georgia is minuscule. I have no doubt this is going to be resolved in his favor. Trump tweets, wow, Governor Kemp will hopefully see the light before it's too late. Must finally take charge. 2 great senators who do so much for Georgia and truly love the USA are in a must-win battle with 2 incompetents who, meanwhile, an election security expert found the Michigan results were a complete fraud because the current machines don't have the ability to count the mass dumps for Biden in the reported time period. Remember here, this great leap forward took place virtually instantaneously. The machines couldn't even count it. So we have a situation with high jumping, doing the back jump of Trump over the bar. Biden needed an extra lift to get there. Totally fraudulent, totally fake. This is being called and corrected. Sidney is leading the way. Giuseppe, your thoughts?
Jim, how fascinating that all the states that betrayed Trump, apparently Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, they're all controlled at the Secretary of State level by a Soros-funded traitor and loyalist to the globalist color revolution. I was stunned to discover, even in formerly red state Arizona, there's a total Soros radical in as Secretary of State. It's unbelievable. And so what you've got in each one of these states is they crow, like Scorpio said, about how secure, or you said it rather, how secure the physical voting is, but that's not how they steal it. They steal it at hacking the Dominion and the Seidel level. I mean, it's absurd that there isn't a way to prove this, because it's obvious that's how they did it.
I think it is going to be provable. And it was Scorpio who was saying how they're boasting of their great work and stealing the election. I mean, this is grotesque. They will be outed. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Grotesque is a good word for it. And it's like I posed the question again, what do you do with all these people who have absolutely no moral compass, no compunction in stealing, cheating, and lying? What do you do with these people? I think that's a real question we have, because if you want to have a functional nation, you can't have it infested by these Soros-funded operatives that have no compunction in stealing and cheating. In the Georgia recount, I was reading somewhere where they found, we found a box of votes. We didn't know it was there. And it was like 85% Biden votes. Then they found a chip of some kind of, we forgot to count this chip that was supposed to go in the computer. I mean, this is just absurd. And I hope it's exposed. I'm amazed at just how blatant and how they don't have any fear about being caught, it seems like.
Well, if it's not exposed, and if Biden is inaugurated at noon on 20 January 2021, the game is on. The second American Revolution will be real. Lock and load. Meanwhile, the election vote, the deeper you look, the worse it gets. I'm going to discuss two companies, Dominion and ES&S. I'd advise investigators not to go to sleep on ES&S. Not going to repeat all the charges against Dominion. Look what happened to Texas when the Secretary of State had an analysis done in the fall of 2018. The report was titled Voting System Examination, Dominion Voting Systems, Democracy Suite 55A, prepared by James Sneeringer, PhD, designee of the Attorney General of Texas. A devil in the details. Adjudication results can be lost in the prior January exam. During an assessment of the ballots, a Dominion representative made a series of mistakes that caused the entire batch of adjudication results to be lost. We did not see the problem again during the exam, but the adjudication system is unchanged, so the vulnerability is still present. Recommendation, certification should be denied. Installation is complex, error-prone, and tedious. I counted 184 steps in their installation manual before deciding to estimate the remaining steps. About 500 are required to install the software. I didn't call the steps that merely said something like click OK or click this. The manual is 412 pages long. Test voting. We discovered some party names and proposition text were not displayed. One scanner wasn't accepting ballots. These all turned out to be errors Dominion made in setting up the standard test election by the Secretary of State. In the case of the scanner, it had accidentally been configured not to accept machine-marked ballots. Misleading messages. The ballot marking devices incorrectly informed voters that they were casting their ballots when in fact they were only printing them. The ballots are not counted until they're scanned. Certification should be denied. Port vulnerability. The ICX ballot marking device has an indicator light to show poll workers when the station is in use. It's connected by a USB port. When Brian Meckler's phone was attached to the USB port, the ICX scanned the files on his phone and did not complain. Though Dominion later showed the event was logged. When a U.S. be derived with files was inserted, the ICX sometimes complained and sometimes did not, apparently according to the contents. The examiner's final conclusion: I cannot recommend certification. Computer systems should be designed to prevent or detect human errors whenever possible and minimize the consequences. Instead, the Democracy Suite 55A is fragile and error prone. In my opinion, it should not be certified for use in Texas. If we turn to ES&S, another voting machine popular in the US, it has a long track record. Here's a ProPublica article. The market for voting machines is broken. This company has thrived in it, published in 2019. Excerpt: in Georgia, where the race for governor had drawn national interest, ESS-owned technology was in use when more than 150,000 votes inexplicably did not cast a vote for lieutenant governor. The aged ES&S managed system did not produce paper backups. Wasn't clear whether mechanical or human error were to blame. In Indiana, ESS systems were plagued by mishaps at the local level. The vote in 2006 in Sarasota, where I reside for quite a few years, ES&S machines lost around 18,000 votes. It's still unclear why. Despite such stumbles, ES&S, based in Omaha, Nebraska, deploying nearly 500 people, controls around 50% of the country's election system market, meaning some 70 million Americans vote using the company's equipment. It's outrageous what's taking place. In Wisconsin, after the 2016 election, ES&S sued to prevent Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate for president, from obtaining information about its machines that might have assisted in her bid for a recount. A judge rejected ES&S argument that submitting to Stein's request would compromise its proprietary technology. ES&S has also threatened lawsuits against voting rights activists. In 2018, it warned it would sue Audit USA, a small nonprofit for election security, for posting the company's manuals for scanners online, which it hadn't done. The same year, the company said it would initiate litigation against security researchers who bought old ES&S machines and attempt to hack them at a conference on cyber security, which I'm quite sure would have taken no time at all. Here's a summary. For the election returns in any precincts to happen the way they did, Biden would have to flip a coin 1,000 times and get heads every time. We aren't done here. More to come. And I'll just say, for my study of computer science, I was in a program studying computer science for PhDs in philosophy and linguistics. A program for counting ballots is as simple as they come. You take a number n and you add 1 to produce a new number n plus 1. The idea there's a 420-page manual that there's something proprietary about the software means that it is designed to obfuscate and steal votes. There's, in my opinion, no question about it. Giuseppe, your thoughts?
Well, Jim, in the real world, you're absolutely right, but we live in Rothschild New World Order clown world where what a great quote. For the election returns in many precincts to happen the way they did, Biden would have to flip a coin 1,000 times and get heads every time. There's no way that would ever happen. And then in clown world, we have Trump's, as of yesterday, election certification at the DHS level claiming this election was rock solid. There's no corruption here. And it reminds me of the other great reset bullshit, the scamdemic, where my dear God, we have the plague because all these tests are coming up positive, even though the PCR test is a complete fraud. It doesn't test. It's not a diagnostic tool. It's a research tool. And so welcome to Rothschild New World Order clown world.
You're absolutely right, Giuseppe. We have that story yet to come today. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Well, you use a good term, deliberate obfuscation. That's exactly what it is. These voting machines are part of this technocratic takeover that we're all experiencing on many fronts. Like you said, the program to count the vote should be about as simple as any computer program could be. But no, it's a very complicated program. You can't possibly understand it. Trust the experts, trust the computer, and it's the same game they're playing with global warming. Oh, we have these computer models, and there's a big hockey stick thing here, and that's going to be what's going to happen. Just trust the experts, trust the computers. And same with COVID. Oh, we've got these tests, and well, some people say they're no good, but you can't possibly understand it. The test says you're positive, so you're positive. That's what we're dealing with, and it's just this. They're asking people to give faith to things they can't possibly know. Just have faith. And it's sort of like the new religion, isn't it? And like you said the other day, we need to go back to simple paper ballots. It hasn't even been that long that we've been using these stupid voting machines. There's no reason we can't go back to paper with a thumbprint and boom, that's it, you're done.
You're 100% right, Scorpio. And it's the old maxim from computer science, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. They can rig these machines any damn way they want, and they were excessive in trying to deprive President Trump of.
Yeah, it's like the computer models with global warming.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct there too. Meanwhile, Denver business owner Dominion's Eric Coomer is an unhinged sociopath. His internet profile is being deleted and erased. This is a guy who was saying during the Twitter thread discussing Antifa, when someone said, what if the effing Trump wins re-election? He said, don't worry, I've effing fixed it to make sure that won't happen. This is the guy. Eric Coomer in 2010 joined Dominion as vice president of U.S. engineering. According to his bio, he graduated from UC Berkeley with a PhD in nuclear physics. He was promoted to voting systems officer of strategy and security. He's since been removed from the page of directors. In fact, our interview with a Denver native, Joe Altman, Coomer's presence has been scrubbed from the internet. Jim Hope interviewed Altman on Sunday. Altman, the founder of Faith Education United, revealed how he infiltrated Antifa and how during a conversation with Antifa members, he discovered Eric from Dominion was a part of the chat. Altman told the Gateway Pundit Eric was telling Antifa members what they needed to keep up the pressure. When one of the calls on a September group asked, who's Eric? Someone acted, Eric, he's the Dominion guy. Altman said the conversation continued. Someone asked, what are we going to do if effing Trump wins? Altman paraphrased how Eric, the Dominion guy, responded. Don't worry about the election. Trump's not going to win. I made effing sure of that. Altman, who runs a Denver data company, started to investigate Eric from Dominion and came upon Eric Coomer. He began digging, trying to find anything, finally hit gold when he was legally able to access Coomer's Facebook page. He never saw such hate and vitriol coming from someone who has a PhD in nuclear physics. He explained to Michelle Malkin, Coomer actually reposted the Antifa manifesto to President Trump on his Facebook page. He originally told the pundit he believes Coomer is mentally ill and a sociopath. Coomer plays a corporate executive during the day and an unhinged Trump hater and Antifa supporter in private. Gateway published a copy of that Antifa letter to Trump. Altman was removed from Twitter last week after he exposed Coomer from Dominion. Joe's tweets on Eric Coomer obviously upset big tech. No surprise there. Meanwhile, this is a Bill Still report
most of the forms
about what's going on in Philadelphia.
Good evening. I'm still reporting on the coup. The boss of the Philly mob, Skinny Joe Merlino, the man most responsible for Joe Biden's faux victory in Pennsylvania, might just be willing to flip on Biden and explain exactly how Pennsylvania political operatives ordered 300,000 election ballots marked for only Biden and had them delivered to the Philadelphia Convention Center at 4 a.m. the morning after Election Day. According to something called the Buffalo Chronicle, which is apparently produced by a 2008 Cornell University graduate named Matthew Ricazzi, a friend of Merlino says that Pennsylvania political operatives paid a crew Merlino hastily put together $10 per ballot, about $3 million for 3 days' work. The ballots were packaged up into cardboard boxes and dropped off outside the Philadelphia Convention Center. According to the Chronicle's source, the ballots were marked up at 2 private households by a trusted mob crew with Sharpie markers. Each person marking the ballots was paid $1,000 per hour for their work. According to the report, government party operatives working inside Philadelphia's election office provided Merlino with crates of raw ballots just hours before the polls closed on election night. Skinny Joe was granted early release from a 2-year prison sentence earlier this year. According to this report, if President Trump were to offer him a full pardon and an expungement for past misdeeds, Merlino might be willing to reveal all in televised congressional testimony. What's in it for Merlino? After spending 3 stints in prison for various crimes, including interstate theft, conspiracy, racketeering, and illegal gambling, Merlino wants to retire from his life of crime. He wants a major Hollywood movie about the greatest political heist in history, of which he played an integral part. Political observers told the Chronicle that movie rights might fetch more than $20 million and a book deal could make him another $10 million. Merlino has always been a publicity hog. According to his associate, you have to understand the thing about Skinny Joey is that he is very charismatic and knows how to tell an enthralling story. He'd be an incredible movie narrator, and he'd perform excellently in congressional testimony. He could hit that testimony so far out of the ballpark that he becomes a superstar instantaneously, a real celebrity mob presence. According to the Chronicle, the damning congressional testimony could make it politically impossible for the Republican-controlled legislature in Pennsylvania to certify that state's 20 electoral votes. The Chronicle appears to be a one-man show of Matthew Ricazzi, a 33-year-old controversial reporter who recently specialized in stories bashing Canada's leftist politicians. Although leftist news outlets such as the Toronto Star and the BBC don't like Ricazzi's Canadian coverage, the Cornell Club of Greater Buffalo still post his happy hour invitations at a local pub called the Thin Man Brewery. The media bias fact-check website labels the Buffalo Chronicle as having a mixed record when it comes to factual reporting and says its contents favor the extreme right, which means a Trump supporter, and show a complete lack of transparency. In any case, he seems considerably more reliable than several recently fired bigwigs at the FBI, or most anything found in the New York Times, the Washington Post, or CNN these days.
And when the votes are really audited and the real votes are counted, Trump will win. He is the president and he is in charge of this country.
I'm still reporting from just outside the citadel of American freedom. Good day.
Bill Still is just a terrific guy, and I think he's right on top of this one. Giuseppe, your thoughts?
Yeah, Bill Still's just down the road from me. I think he's in McLean, Virginia. It's interesting. I'm beginning to have a greater and greater understanding of the globalist color revolution hierarchical org chart. At the top, you have satanic psychopaths. They sacrifice children. They're swilling adrenochrome. They're absolutely cutthroat. Then you go down a level and you've got mid-level sociopaths and mentally ill operatives. And then you get to the foot soldiers, and you've got stupid, mind-controlled, low-impulse chimps. And there you go. That's the color revolution org chart.
Very, very nice, Giuseppe. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Nice visual there, Giuseppe. If you look at that guy that claims that he made sure Trump won't win, look at the guy's eyes. I mean, he really does have an unhinged, mentally unbalanced look in his eyes. Truly someone that is mentally ill. And it's just like these mug shots of these Antifa people. They have the same crazen look in their eyes. And, I don't think they realize how difficult it is to rebuild a civilization once you destroy it. because that's what they're trying to do. And they just don't understand how difficult it is to rebuild something once it's destroyed. And, about what Bill Still was saying, it makes me wonder, though, if a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there, does it make a sound? Well, you have to wonder if there's massive voter fraud exposed and it's not reported on television, will anyone hear it? I hope so, but because I think you're going to hear a symphony of crickets if this does ever come out into the open, because we have a mainstream media that's fully weaponized and is a weapon of our enemy, essentially. And, Philly has been long known as one of the most corrupt cities in the country, second only to Chicago. So these antics coming out of Philly don't surprise me. And I have to say, though, I'm dubious about some movie being made about Skinny Joe or his dealings, because look at who runs Hollywood and who controls it. I can't believe that they would make a movie exposing themselves and their own misdeeds. Because Hollywood's been fully on board with this hoax. If things get serious, Skinny Joe might be fitted for a nice new pair of cement boots, but we'll have to wait and see what happens there.
Several points in response. You can see now why the media was pushing the fake polls, because they had the election rigged to conform to the polls, which were therefore supposed to have been accurate, when they were deliberately contrived based on the assumption the election would be stolen, using Dominion and Smartmatic to conform to the polls. So that was part of the cover story, which means, based on the executive order the president signed in 2018, all of those pollsters with all those fake polls and all of the television commentators who were promoting them as part and parcel of the scam, which means they and their assets are subject to seizure and prosecution. And Skinny Joe might still make it into the media because there are a lot of independent producers now with the independents. Hell, you or I, Scorpio, and Giuseppe could make a video about Skinny Joe and we could get it out there. And remember now that this legal effort is not dependent on media coverage. If it were, the deals are done. It's with bought and sold. There's nothing to see here. Just move on. And I had not noticed that Tucker last night, where I was working on preparing for this show and others, had actually said the election's over. That's ridiculous. He's got to know better. That's acutely disappointing.
He said it twice, Jim, and he did it very kind of subtly when he was talking about another subject about the big tech overlords. He just popped it in there and just kept going.
Very nice catch. Meanwhile, we'll be back in a moment. Here we go. Biden from his basement. Am I president yet? And notice that's not even the real Joe. It's got the wrong earlobes. This is the fake. And I'm still hoping they're going to arrest him as a fraud. I thought getting a national security briefing would be the occasion that they had to verify his identity. Maybe he didn't show up on purpose and is getting the briefings instead from Kamala, who by virtue of her role in the Senate is reportedly giving them to him. Meanwhile, a Portuguese court has ruled the PCR tests are unreliable and unlawful, and it's unlawful to quarantine people. The court stated their reliability depend on the number of cycles, the viral overload present. The court concludes if someone's tested by PCR as positive, when a threshold of 35 cycles or higher is used, as in the rule in most laboratories, the probability that said person is infected is less than 3%. The probability it's a false positive is 97. The threshold used in PCR tests in India is between 37 and 40, which makes their reliability less than 3%, the false positive higher than 97. Meanwhile, a class action lawsuit has been announced against the perpetrators of the pandemic hoax. This is very serious. German trial lawyer Roman Felmich follows up on his initial announcement of class action lawsuits against perpetrators of what he calls the pandemic hoax. He summarizes the main charges that he says will easily be proven through the process of discovery and witness cross-examination. He will prove that whatever is causing the symptoms attributed to COVID-19 caused no more hospitalizations or death than the seasonal flu. And the commonly used PCR test is incapable of detecting COVID-19. And the sole purpose of PCR testing is to generate large numbers of false positives that can be called cases and will frighten the population into passively accepting vaccines and a restructuring of society without question. Meanwhile, among the quotes that are cited here, the chief scientist for 16 years at Pfizer, Dr. Mike Yerden, says the tests are completely useless. This test is fatally flawed. I've explained how a hopelessly performing diagnostic test has been and continues to be used not for diagnosis of disease, but for seemingly solely to create fear. That's what it's all about, creating fear. So people won't ask questions, but do as they're told. I know this from a paper leaked by someone at the office of the German Secretary of the Interior called the Panic Paper. It includes the explicit direction for the government of how to create panic. One thing it states there is make children feel responsible for, and that's a direct quote, the tortured deaths of their parents and grandparents if they don't adhere to the social distancing rules and the mask wearing rules. So that's when I decided, when we learned this is absolutely completely wrong. This is not about a corona pandemic. This is a CPR test pandemic. But for what reason? This is something I'm saying because I can prove this in court. Because all the people who listen to in our corona committee will definitely state the same thing as expert witnesses. Meanwhile, it turns out mouthwash can kill COVID-19 in 30 seconds. A new study conducted at Cardiff University found mouthwash containing at least 0.07% cetipedrinium chloride, CPC, showed promising sign of reducing transmission. This is regarding mouthwashes. In the preliminary report, researchers tested how effective a handful of mouthwash brands, including Dental and Listerine, containing ethanol, essential oils, cetipedrinium chloride, and povidone iodide were at eradicating the virus. They found 3 of the mouthwashes eradicated the virus completely. Of these 3 products, 2 contained at least 0.07% CPC, the third percent, 23% ethanol with ethyl lauryl agenate. I mean, this is what Giuseppe and you, David, and I have been reporting from the beginning. Giuseppe, you were spot on from the start. Your thoughts?
Well, Jim, I put my old professional journalism hat on again and published an article. I was honored. One of the best news sites on the internet, Real News, winterwatch.net, published on the 17th, and the headline says it all. Wildly inaccurate PCR testing puts the scam in the COVID-19 scamdemic. And it's encouraging to see that the Portoguese court realized it and ruled in the favor. I really am rooting for the German class action suit. And the interesting thing most people don't understand, again, about viruses is they're extremely weak in nature. And if they get exposed to any type of cleaning agent, they can be easily destroyed. And this whole thing is just a massive fraud. It's a scandemic on a global level. And it's just people like ourselves, like Judy Mikovits, who's going to be on the Perfect Triangle this Friday, John Rappaport, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, Robert Kennedy Jr., Del Bigtree. I mean, we all have to feel like we're living through the looking glass of the Lewis Carroll novel, because we know what's going on, but the great hypnotized mass of sheeple and goyim cattle, oh, but I trust the religion of the white lab coats. They wouldn't lie to me. They'll take care of me. They're my nanny. The nanny state will save us. It's unbelievable.
I think they're just incapable of reasoning this through and not knowing any better. It's more comforting to them to trust the state, the authorities like Tony the Rat, than it is to have to come through to a conclusion on their own, because they don't trust their own ability to reason, to think.
Yeah.
Scorpio, your thoughts?
Yeah, the religion of the white lab coats. I like that. That's a good one. That is a good bit of news from Portugal. It shows that some people are being honest and speaking the truth. I'm very glad to hear that, because they're chipping away at this COVID scam-a-lama ding-dong, and slowly but surely, I think the narrative is going to fall apart, because it really is all about creating fear. That's really is what it's all about. And you get that lower brain function going, and rational thought goes right out the window. And, that's the whole goal here, is to prevent rational thought. And, the mainstream media, I've noticed on their so-called news, they like to show someone crying every single day. It's either a nurse or a doctor or the family relative of a COVID victim just crying away on screen, because that amps up the emotion. And then that's when the critical thinking stops. Oh, look, someone's crying. It's real. And, about the mouthwash, that's very interesting. Everywhere I go, I ask people, hey, are you afraid of the virus? And I had a great response from a taxi driver the other day. He goes, no, I'm not afraid of the virus, because I drink a cup of Puro, which is like pure grain alcohol that they make down here. It's like moonshine. He goes, I drink a little cup of that every night before bed, so I'm not afraid at all. I thought that was a great response.
We all knew alcohol was medicinal, right? I think there's going to be a boom in mouthwash. Meanwhile, the hunger game has begun. The elite have begun their full-scale execution and decimation of the middle class. This is what the World Economic Forum wants. The coronavirus is disrupting food supply chains because farmers and laborers cannot work or travel. Transportation delays are causing shortages in the U.S. Meat processing plants have been forced to close, based upon, of course, false positives. Not only are these breaks affecting the availability of food, but also its affordability. Millions who've already struggled to support themselves and their families have been struck by economic hardship caused by lockdowns around the globe. Millions will be pushed into extreme poverty owing to the pandemic, but the long-term effects will be even worse, as poor nutrition in childhood causes lifelong suffering. Already 1 in 5 children around the world are stunted in their growth by the age of 5, and millions more are likely to suffer the same fate if poverty rates soar. Throughout history, mankind has waged a constant war with starvation. From the time of the first hunter-gatherers through the early cultivation of crops, all the way to our modern industrial farming techniques, we've been working to ensure we can survive the next winter when no crops are growing or animals hide in their burrows. To our ancestors, this was a great challenge, unlike today. For that reason, the idea of being a prepper would be strange, since they all lived a prepping lifestyle. But the situation is getting more and more severe. Somehow, modern Western culture has distanced itself from the reality of needing to grow food. As the number of farmers in our midst keeps dwindling, industrialized farming takes over. Fewer and fewer people have any idea of where our food comes from. The idea that grocery store produces meat and vegetables rather than farmers and ranchers growing it might make for a good joke, but the ignorance behind it is frightening. In the U.S., as the number 1 food producing nation in the world, yet we do with a very small percentage of our overall population. Farming, fishing, forestry, and related activities count for only 1.8% of the overall workforce. They not only produce the food we eat, but much that's exported overseas. We depend on this small portion of our population and others who work in the food service industry to keep the rest of us fed. The rest of us don't even bother thinking about it. After all, there's always food at the grocery store, lots of food. It's always be there, won't it? But what if they can't? Since coronavirus lockdown has started, the farmers can't produce the food needed to feed our population, let alone all the other countries in the world that buy 159 billion in American food products. What will we do next? Main drivers of acute food insecurity found all over the continent include conflict insecurity, interstate conflicts, internal violence, regional insecurity, political crisis, often result in people being displaced as refugees, weather extremes, droughts and floods, economic shocks, macroeconomic hyperinflation, currency depreciation, microeconomic, rising food prices, reduced purchasing power, pests, desert locusts, army worms, health shocks, disease outbreaks such as COVID-19. which can be worsened by poor quality of water, sanitation, or air displacement. A major side effect of conflict, food insecurity, and weather shocks. We're not hearing about it. Should there be an actual shortage, there's a need for rationing. That would be a function of the USDA, who would be responsible. What's scarier than the potential of food shortages? We're not hearing about it. The USDA doesn't appear to be doing anything about it. Nothing's being done to prepare for the shortages. This means when they begin to manifest, nobody's going to be ready. Can the food run short? There are places all over the world where food shortages are the norm already. I've had church pastors from other countries in my home told me about people they bury, even children, because they have starved to death. A very real problem in a number of different countries, not something made up by nonprofit organizations. We aren't going to run into that problem here, are we? Well, we could. We maybe won't, because we produce something like 180 billion tons of food per year. Actually, about a third of that goes to waste. Listen to this. The reason is we're very focused on the appearance of our food. That began after World War II, coinciding with electric refrigerators becoming commonplace. Even with their faults, those early electric refrigerators were much more efficient than ice boxes, made a difference in how our food looked, especially produce. No longer did homemakers have to concern themselves with brown spots on produce. It would be consumed before that happened. Now, however, homemakers are more selective, passing over imperfect produce, looking for better produce options. Noticing this, grocers stopped putting less than perfect produce on the shelves, opting to throw it away and make their selection look better. This worked its way back to the farm. Now a lot of food goes from the farm right to the landfill rather than trucking it to the store. Mind you, there's nothing wrong with all this food that gets thrown away. In most cases, the flaws are superficial, mere cosmetic blemishes. I'm not talking about food that's spoiled, just food that doesn't look so good. Should the food supply begin to run short, we'll first see a rise of prices. They'll make our grocery bill higher. There'll be those who can't spend as more. They will suffer, but it could all stop tomorrow. The food, produce, and services industries depend on trucking more so than any other. With our nation's trucking industry taking food from the farm to various processing facilities, without that, the supermarket shelves would be empty in a day. I'm here watching it happening in Wyoming. Severe winter weather has made all the roads impassable with over 200 miles of interstate closed down. It's making it difficult for truckers to make their deliveries, which lead to empty shelves in the store. Should this last for more than a few days, things could get serious. Here's just a glimpse of what you'll find, a superfood, bulletproof against any food shortage. It's a food that vanished with the Incas over 6 centuries ago. This mysterious dish just recently rediscovered by NASA, giving away rations of it to our brave men and women in their month-long space missions. The Incas stored it in pit holes for up to 10 years, ate it year-round, actually used it to survive a 4-year-long super drought that wiped out their southern neighbors. So if it managed to save the Incas a century ago, and it still works for our astronauts today, you can bet your last dollar it will keep you and your family well-fed in any crisis. The best part is you probably already have the ingredients in your kitchen now. Stunning stuff. Giuseppe, your thoughts?
What a fantastic article by Jack Meter. I mean, essentially, we were talking about those satanic globalist psychopaths, and one of the things they've done with the scam of the global economy is create this just-in-time food supply, which is absolutely ridiculous. Luckily, we won't starve because we produce so much. It just becomes a question of how to change the distribution model. But in the interim, a couple of months of this planned destruction, attempted destruction of the country, will force us all to really readjust. And what I recommend is, number one, you need to get yourself a good gravity water filter. Like there's a brand that we've used for a decade called Berkey, Berkey, and you can even take mud water from outside and run it through, and you can then drink the water. You can process toilet water and it's drinkable. It's awesome. So you got to make sure you're always going to have clean water if the worst happens. And the other thing to do is you should have like 2 to 3 months of food and you can be like, well, I don't have the room. Well, yeah, you do. You could buy, there's a type of packaging called aseptic packaging where they suck all the air out. And so they put like soup in an aseptic little square. You can get 100 of those and keep them in your closet. You can get rice, and you need to just basically have enough to ride it out. The American people will not allow themselves to be starved to death, but there may be a 90 to 120 day period where you got to take care of yourself. And so that's what realistic prepping is for people in the cities. You need clean water and you need enough food to last 90 days.
Wonderful, wonderful report, Giuseppe. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Well, I've been noticing that recently, if you monitor the enemy war footage known as the mainstream media, they've been dropping little breadcrumbs about the possibility of a food shortage. And if you notice, they're showing these long lines of people waiting in their cars to get food handouts from, the National Guard guys in Army uniforms. I find that very ominous. And don't forget that, starvation and food shortages is a very true time and tested technique of the communists to control their population. They've done it many times before. We're dealing with that kind of mentality now, believe me. And I did not know that farming is only 1.8% of the job economy. That's frightening. It's just another indication we need to go back to organic farming and have thousands of new small farms across the country growing organic food using methods that don't strip the soil of minerals and fill it full of toxins from toxic chemicals. So that we need to really think about new paradigms for us to live, because this system, they're going to use it as a weapon against us. People need to understand that and prepare for it. And it's shocking how much food is actually thrown away. I've seen that firsthand. Behind supermarkets, you'll often find a dumpster just absolutely full of produce with just small spots on it and stuff. You're absolutely right. That really is true. And I just want everyone to know, as a solution, the so-called elite, they want us to eat bugs. Go online and look at this. A lot of big wigs have talked about this, how bugs are wonderful and they're high in protein, and that can be a food source for the people in the future. So people need to think about food. It will be used as a weapon against us in the near future. I really do believe that.
I think you're 100% correct, Scorpio, and this may be why we have Deagle projecting a drop in the U.S. population from 330 million in 2020 to less than 100 in 2025, a loss of 2/3 of the U.S. population. Starvation would be a very effective mechanism to bring that outcome about. Meanwhile, some early big shifts on immigration expected under Biden. Some dramatic moves on immigration are expected in the early days of the Biden administration to use executive orders to reverse Trump's most controversial actions. They want to restore protection for people brought to the U.S. illegally as minors, stop the Pentagon from building a border wall. He's got a detailed, highly ambitious plan on immigration. Restricting immigration was a signature move for Trump, who enabled blacks and Latinos, the lowest wage earners in America, to see their wages rising at the highest rate because they weren't having their jobs stolen away. Well, the Democrats want to undo that. His administration, Trump banned travelers from some predominantly Muslim countries, but that was because they were terrorist countries. This is a continuation of propaganda. Biden has said immigration is central to who we are as a nation, but it's going to be used to destroy America. He's going to move quickly, undo. They plan to reinstate the deferred action for childhood arrivals. Everything else, they're going to do bad things. Meanwhile, Trump's decision to pull troops back from Afghanistan could put Biden in a strategic corner. Larry Goodson, an authority on Afghanistan from the Army War College, said dramatically reducing the size of the force in Afghanistan so close to the change of administrations would be a mistake. Trump's move also seems at odds with events on the ground. including a recent spate of bombings and assassinations in Kabul. If the troop withdrawal leads to greater instability, you're faced with the Biden administration having to immediately countermand all of that and send forces back to reoccupy positions. It really paints the Biden administration into a political and strategic corner. Jonathan Schroden, a research program at the CNA who made 13 trips to Afghanistan, said it an ironic consequence of Tuesday's announcement of troop reduction. It will give Biden roughly what he had argued for as vice president in 2009 when he proposed limiting U.S. forces to a small presence focused on counterterrorism. So he won't, accept anything Trump's done, even if it was his own plan. Giuseppe, your thoughts?
Well, if Groper Joe Biden is installed, you can bet that every checkbox will be checked to support the globalist color revolution view of life. No borders, hate Whitey, blame Whitey for everything. And that's good old Groper Joe. That's what's coming. Hopefully, Sidney Powell saves the day. And the troop withdrawal is absolutely vital. He got elected in 2016 on doing that, and it's funny that he took all but a couple weeks of his first term to get around to that. And similar withdrawals should come out of Iraq, and we should no longer be the thug, the Luca Brasi for the greater Israeli project. We should bring the troops home, secure our own border. And if Trump somehow gets rewarded with his actual victory, he needs to turn into a real nationalist and a real populist and get some payback for the people who've all tried to stab him in the back with their long knives.
I foresee that as coming, Giuseppe. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Well, hey, I thought we had this pandemic. Why are we going to let more refugees in, let more illegal aliens in, willy-nilly, just wandering through the desert, come on in. I thought we had this pandemic. Shouldn't we close this off and stop these people from coming? They might have COVID. Well, of course, this is just another indication that this whole thing is a fraud, and they're just going to move ahead with the agenda. This open border policy is sort of just a backdoor route to getting globalism and destroying the native culture, European culture of the United States. And the other thing is Afghanistan. Why did Trump wait 4 years to do this? I'm glad he's finally decreasing the troops, but why did he wait 4 years? He should have done it at the very beginning. And, it's amazing how all these establishment hacks and so-called liberals are so up in arms about this. Well, this is going to destroy our security. This is a security threat to the United States. They're going to kidnap Americans. Our enemies are going to come get us. All this crap I'm hearing. And, isn't it amazing that, we actually built a wall. Our Army Corps engineers built a wall between Afghanistan and Pakistan. It's rarely talked about, but we paid and built a wall between those two countries. And yet, you can't build a wall here. That's racist. That's bad. It's going to destroy the habitat of the something turtle, So it's just amazing how once you understand what the agenda is, the actions of this government become very transparent.
Oh, Scorpio, those were wonderful points. I think you're 100% correct. Meanwhile, Biden suggests Americans limit Thanksgiving and gatherings in their own homes and wear masks. This is monstrous. Biden reiterated inside the home, hope people would be able to get together next Thanksgiving and next Christmas. You can see what's coming. McEnany calls the state's coronavirus precautions for Thanksgiving Orwellian. The American people know how to protect their health. We've dealt with COVID for many months. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany Wednesday described state-level guidance intended to curb the spread of COVID at Thanksgiving as Orwellian. I think a lot of the guidelines you're seeing are Orwellian, referring to Thanksgiving guidance issued by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. We've dealt with COVID for many months, but it's Orwellian in a place like Oregon to say if you gather in numbers more than 6, we might come to your house and arrest you and you get 30 days of jail time. That's not the American way. We don't lose our freedom in this country. We make responsible health decisions as individuals. Oregon Governor Kate Brown announced Friday the state would enter a 2-week freeze, suspending in-person dining, shutting certain businesses like gyms, limiting social gatherings to 6 people. Violations could result in citation, fine, or arrest. One of several states to impose new coronavirus restrictions. Meanwhile, America is governed by Americans, announces the president. We reject the ideology of globalism and we embrace the doctrine of patriotism. He's 100% right. I encourage everyone to participate from the comfort of your own home. False Flags and Conspiracies 2025 to 6 December. Check it out at falseflagconspiracies2020.com. This is a pay-per-view with 24 experts on conspiracies and false flags, among the best the world has ever known. We are so surrounded by conspiracies that the grim reality is that if today you are not a conspiracy theorist, you are a gullible sap. The price is right, very inexpensive. Check it out. We even have a special now for veterans. You can watch the whole 2 days for $100 only. Watch it all, covering 15 to 18 different conspiracies and false flags. This is one you don't want to miss to remain informed. Giuseppe, your final thoughts.
My final thoughts are, Jim, that's going to be just a rocking conference. Really looking forward to that heavy hitter lineup. But I would suggest that you change your description from conspiracy theorist to conspiracy analyst, because all these things are real and they're happening. And it's up to us to analyze exactly what's going on. The theorizing is long gone. And so secondly, Joe Biden is a lowlife, a slug who's going to go along with the greatest psychological operation in the history of mankind. Masks are worthless. Masks do nothing. We already knew it, but Monday, the 16th, the Danish government released a massive 6,000 patient study, massive, with all kinds of double blind truce precautions, and they released masks do nothing to prevent the coronavirus SARS-CoV-2. It's all a scam. It's all slave training. The only thing you do when you agree to wear a mask is to show that you're a coward and you're not strong enough to stand up to this utter oppression, this utter tyranny. Don't wear those goddamn masks. Grow a spine, grow a backbone, and be a real American.
Scorpio, your final thoughts.
I agree about the conspiracy analyst, or you could also say conspiracy realist,
Right.
because this is all happening in real time. It is no longer a theory. I remember those days when it was a conspiracy theory, and those days have long since passed. And, you know, the other day, Newsom actually had the nerve, Governor Newsom of California had the nerve to tell people to make sure to put your mask on in between bites at Thanksgiving. I mean, are people really going to put up with this? Because if they do, they're going to keep pushing until people start resisting in massive numbers. And we need to all realize that. And I think the real reason why they want to stop all these family get-togethers is they don't want people getting together and talking with each other, because then uncomfortable questions will be asked and uncomfortable answers will be given. That is their greatest fear. So they don't want people to figure out this scam. That's their greatest fear.
Scorpio, you're spot on. This is Jim Fetzer in Madison, Wisconsin. Thanking Giuseppe Vafanculo from the District of Criminals and David Scorpio from the exotic land of Ecuador for the many impeccable points they have made today. Yes, they do not want the public to gather together, because then they might figure out that they're being scammed, they're being deprived of their life, their liberty, their property. That's the ultimate objective. We must all nullify and invert the meaning of being a conspiracy theorist by taking it from rumor, speculation, and guesswork to empirically testable propositions in the sense of theories. Newton's theory of gravitation, Einstein's theory of relativity, Darwin's theory of evolution. That is what I have done again and again and again. And if you can't understand, you're being enveloped by a conspiracy that threatens your life and the well-being of your children and their children and everything for which America has stood, then you, alas, are a gullible sap. So I reiterate today, come participate in the conference. You will understand what's been going on. Don't let yourself be played. And if Joe Biden should be inaugurated on January 20th, be prepared. That will initiate the second American Civil War. Put in your supplies, stock up on ammo. When January 20 comes, should this monstrous election hoax and fraud not be thoroughly exposed and refuted by then, if Donald Trump is not re-elected as president of the United States, be locked and loaded. The time will have come. Join us tomorrow for more news you need to know. Thanks for being with us today.